one black lawyer in their entire history. And of course, Hayes took this shabby, politically motivated stuff and used it to try to discredit its opponents. And this really is a policy that, as it's developed, and we can go back now and look at the history, we see how concerted this was and how organized this was. I mean, all of this really began in the wake of the defeat of comprehensive immigration reform, Bill 1639, in June of 2007. Frank Sherry, who was the executive director of the National Immigration Forum, trying to explain how it was that they lost a battle that they all were certain they would win. I mean, after all, they had everybody, as it were, who was anybody on their side. The corporate sector in the service industries, big religion, including the Catholic Church, the foundation culture, all the newspapers of record, major media, the political leadership of both political parties, the president and his administration. I mean, the only thing they didn't have was the American people. And what they concluded was that we were engaged, this is at least Frank Sherry's view, we were engaged in what we assumed was a policy battle, but in fact we figured out we had lost in a culture war. That was the term they used. And so basically what they determined to do, and I say they, a handful of organizations like National Council of La Raza and the Southern Poverty Law Center and Hayes and the National Immigration Forum, was to launch a campaign of demonization and vilification of their opponents by coming up with these utterly false and outrageous allegations that their opponents were bigots or racists or white supremacists or whatever. And if these charges were not so ugly, I would find them simply risible and contemptible. But they're really, really ugly. I'm thinking of my organization. The chair of our board is Hispanic. We have a tiny board. Several members are African Americans, including the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I mean, it's just preposterous. These charges are preposterous. My whole life has been dedicated to equal justice, and I was very much involved in the civil rights movement. I even was involved, now given what that organization is doing, I'm ashamed to say, I was a member of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. That is another organization that has joined this campaign to try to marginalize, silence its opponents on immigration.
What did the ADL say about you, and in what forum?
Oh, it was simply in a sentence or two, in a story that was run in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, which was, I mean, all things considered, not a terrible story. I mean, I think that, reading the story, you'd sort of finish and not know exactly who was in the right or who was in the wrong. That was still better than the forward story, which seemed to suggest that, that the other side had it right. I remember the title of that story was something like, Immigration Critic Cries McCarthyism, which to me smacked of, cries wolf or something. But anyway, the JTA story was a pretty fair story. But in the course of that story, they interviewed an attorney, I don't remember her name, from the ADL, who said, essentially something like, I don't think it had any more substance than there's something fishy about this guy Steinle. And I'm thinking, what's fishy about me? I mean, I was a professor for about 20 years, and I worked for the Holocaust Museum, and I worked for the National Conference of Christians and Jews, and I worked for the American Jewish Committee, and I worked for the anti-slavery group, then I worked for CIS. Now, what's fishy about me? In fact, I think one could say that I've lived a life of civic virtue. I've lived the life of a person who cares passionately about doing good. So that was the sum total of what ADL had to say. I say that I've made a point of noting that I feel sad about the Hadassah business because I like the members. I like the local members of that organization. On the other hand, being demeaned, being defamed by the Anti-Defamation League is not only kind of, there's a certain ironic comedy in it all, but considering this is an organization that not long ago tried to deny the Armenian genocide, to curry favor with the Turks on behalf of Israel, was so repulsive and so morally nauseating that I wear it as a badge of honor that the ADL doesn't like me very much. For a Jewish organization to get involved in the Holocaust, the genocide denial business for short-term political ends, and if you look around, I mean, a lot of us knew where Turkey was headed while they were up to that game. I mean, it's become a thoroughly Islamist country. Thank goodness the Pope has spoken out strongly about them not joining Europe. The ADL was there. I mean, so an organization that goes around denying genocide, yeah, they can defame me. Go ahead. I mean, an organization that has that kind of a moral, that's driven by that kind of moral idiocy, that doesn't trouble me. I was, as I said, I was troubled with an organization like Hadassah, did what it did. But again, that's, those people aren't speaking for the very, very fine, decent women who, raise money for good causes. These are a handful of people who have, a set of political prejudices and simply attack people that don't agree with them.
I can think of a minority group with even more self-interest in the immigration debate than Jews, and that's blacks. So do you have any sense what the black community, the average black, and the black elites?
Oh, sure, yes, and I'm glad you got into that issue, because it's a terribly important one for a whole lot of reasons. There's no community in the country that could be identified as directly as being brutally affected by the kind of incessant, massive immigration that we're having. I mean, in an economy right now where we have what's referred to as U6, the federal government has a term called U6 unemployment, and that means people who are out of work looking for work, people who have despaired of finding any work, or people who have been forced to work part-time, which means that their lives are purgatorial in trying to keep up with their lives and support families and so on. That's right now 17.5% of the American working force, and a highly disproportionate segment of that is African American. The number one immigration economist in America is George Borjas, who holds a chair at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And by the way, I just want to say in passing, when this campaign of libel was launched against the Center for Immigration Studies, George Borjas has a blog, and he wrote about his horror of these accusations. He said, as a Hispanic, I have worked with this organization for years. They do superb research, and I have never been aware of the least hint of anti-Hispanic feeling. So you'll forgive me, I wanted to get that in there. George Borjas has done the most important work on the effect of immigration on African Americans. And he's talked about the fact that he's literally laid out charts, which I've seen because he's spoken at the center. If you look at bubbles, as they're referred to, surges in immigration, let's say since 1990, and you look at a chart of surges in the incarceration rates of African American men between, say, ages 19 and 40, they are perfect. They overlay perfectly. The fact is that African Americans are the ones who are losing the jobs most to immigrant Mexicans in terms of housing and in just about everything else I can think of. Their situation has fallen and falling deeper into poverty, greater job loss, and also the competition with cheap immigrant labor, which, by the way, doesn't only affect African Americans, it affects all American workers, but affects African Americans more than others because they have less to start out with, it's dropping the floor on wages and working conditions. And they are the first group that sees it. it's one of the things